Next up, how to check in and out of countries when
was,
sailing.
how do you organise to leave one country by boat and enter another country?
Immigration, customs, the captainery.
Before we left Australia for the first time in 2018, the thing I used to wonder the most was how do you organise to leave one country by boat and enter another country? Having been to 9 different countries now, it's still a question we get asked a lot, and it's both easier and harder than you think. Australian Border Force to see what we need to do to check out.
We go to immigration first, then customs, then the captainery, whoever he is.
Stop 2, customs. So we have duty-free fuel on the way out and something to give to the captain. To customs and immigration, having been given 3 separate sets of instructions.
Oh, you broke your thong, baby.
That's alright, she'll go back in.
Which we thought would be 10 minutes. That was maybe an hour or 2 ago. So we'll just keep waiting.
There goes customs, immigration and biosecurity. The customs lady wanted to go and look around the boat, which they're allowed to do. And I showed her fridges and blah blah blah, and then the stuff that we had for trading, gifts and stuff. And she just started taking stuff for herself out of the things we had that were to be given to villagers and stuff, and it just seemed like she was stealing, really, without any real reason, and she didn't give any justification, and I felt very uncomfortable and probably should have said something but didn't, given that items were relatively low value and we didn't want any hassle with any of the officials. And then they left. So, a bit of a bad taste, really.
Well, we are checked in to Thailand.
Unprecedented efficiency.
Yeah. 3 or 4 different offices we had to go into, but they were literally next to each other. And the staff were efficient, very, very friendly. It was the easiest process by far. So,
because we're about to go to New Zealand, I'm going to use New Zealand as the example. I'm going to cover the 5 things that are really important when you're going from one country to another. So there's obviously leaving the country that you're in this case Australia. There is how do you go about getting into another country, what paperwork, etc. 3, the practicalities of being at sea for 10 days, provisioning spare parts. And then 4, from a country perspective, what you do when you arrive in that country. And then part 5 is sort of hints and tips at the end related to really leaving and entering any country. Part 1, which is leaving Australia. Obviously you need passports that are up to date. Because we're Australian, we don't need a visa to go to New Zealand, and many of the other countries we visited, we haven't needed visas, but some do. And some you need to get before you get to the country, or you only get a visa on arrival, which is very short. So you need to check. Your boat also needs a passport of sorts. So it's called the Australian Ships Registry. It can take a very long time to get your ship's passport through. Now we did this when we left in 2018, and it took me 9 months to get all the paperwork organised and get it all ticked off. It actually came through literally, we physically got it the day before we left the country, although they had processed it a month before. And you get the original, and you need to show the original, and you need to keep it very safe because it's an expensive document to replace. Australia wants you to do a temporary export of your vessel, as if you were leaving the country on your boat permanently, the boat was never coming back, and or you might be selling it overseas. It is an extremely complicated document to find. I've got a link down below if you want to have a look at the Australian Border Force website, which has got an export page. It's really an export page for people who are exporting a lot of things. From like a commercial perspective, but it does talk about boats. It took me a long time to find this page, although having found it, it looks pretty obvious, but it just wouldn't come up in any searches that I did. On this page is a document. This is not the most current version of that document though. What I didn't know was it wasn't the most current version of the document. So I downloaded it, filled it, went to Australian Border Force in Brisbane. Very helpful people there. Pretty much stepped us through how to fill out the form, how to Google for the codes, because they won't give you the codes, but they will tell you how to search for the codes. But what they do if you just ring up or if you ask other people is they ask you to just get a customs agent to do it, because it is a complicated bit of paperwork to fill in. Customs agents will charge you $500 or $600 to do this, and the actual process of getting this form is free, and I wasn't willing to spend that amount of money. So I would have done a couple of days of research and phone calls and emails to get to this point. But once we got to Australian Border Force, as I said, very helpful, filled in the form, got an email back 2 days later with, this is your temporary export document. A lot of hair tearing out to get to that point, but once we actually got to Australian Border Force with the right document, really easy. They were extremely helpful. And the final thing you need to do is you need to let them know what your port is that you're going to. So you must leave from a port that's recognised in Australia. There's a list on the website as what recognised ports are, but you have to go port to port. So you can't stop randomly anywhere in a country before you have checked in, and likewise once you've checked out, you can't then go and stop in lots of different places. The clear exception in this case is that you are allowed to stop at Lord Howe Island, as long as you let them know at Australian Border Force that you're going to be doing that, and you're not really meant to stay for more than 3 or 4 days. They are a little bit flexible because weather can be quite poor. We've been there before, so we know that they allow this a little bit of flexibility. And we've advised both Lord Howe and got the permits to stop at Lord Howe, and we've also told Australian Border Force. You then need to book with Australian Border Force to get them to come to your boat and clear you out of the country. And once they do clear you out of the country, you then essentially have to leave within a relatively short period of time. That's the formalities to leave Australia. The website, and there's a link to it in the description below, for leaving Australia has almost got no information on it whatsoever. It required a lot of sort of extra Googling to try and figure out all the different bits and pieces that I've just spoken to you about. The website for the New Zealand customs is off the charts good. It is literally step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. That's prior to leaving. In step 5, it's got, these are the 2 documents that you need. Please email them to us before you leave to let us know that you're coming. Email us again or radio in up to 48 hours before you arrive to let us know that you are actually arriving. The email they want you to send is the advance notice form and the yachts and small crafts form. Within that, they want also passport photos, all passengers and crew on board, a photo of your boat, the boat registration, your boat insurance, and also the bill of sale of your boat, essentially proving that you do own the vessel that you're sailing in on. The final part of their website has got what to do once you arrive. Once you actually arrive in New Zealand, you pull up to your designated port that they're giving you. We are going to Apua in the Bay of Isles, which is the northernmost port that you can check into New Zealand, on the North Island, thereby shortening the distance that we are travelling as much as possible, because I don't need to turn a 10-day or an 8-day passage into an 11-day passage, because we want to go down to Auckland, which is the next one, I think, or Whangarei. And we've also had a look at the marina there and the customs wharf there, and they've got a beautiful sea crescent-shaped wharf, which you can pull up to day or night, tie up, go to sleep, completely controlled by customs, no access to land. And the Bay of Isles Bay is really, really well lit and marked with channel markers. Then you wake up in the morning, you contact them on the VHF, and they will send out 2 different people to you. Normally, first off, you get Customs and Immigration. They will do your biosecurity form, your passenger card, which is pretty much the same passenger card that you fill out on a plane, and check out all your documents that you've already provided them, but they want to then see the original of your boat registration. And they didn't ask to see our insurance, but they could have if they wanted to. You can't leave the boat or the wharf that you tied up to. You wait a couple of hours normally, and biosecurity come. The biosecurity page for the New Zealand arrivals is once again really clear, and I knew very well what we were about to lose from a food and fresh produce perspective. Pretty much any fresh fruit and veg goes. Pork for New Zealand, eggs and some seeds, and any frozen herbs that you might have. So all my frozen Asian pandan leaves and curry leaves and stuff. I knew I was probably going to lose all of those. However, we pretty much cooked a lot of the things before we got here and ate them. So I actually had the boat down to a relatively small amount of food that I was willing to lose. And we had a big sort of cooked breakfast that morning, which had finished off our eggs and our bacon and that sort of thing. So that went really well. And then we're in. Practicalities of arriving is you need to have some flags. Coming into a foreign country, you fly the quarantine flag or the Q flag, which is a square yellow flag, and also a courtesy flag of that country's up your mast, separate to your own country's flag that you would fly, for example, at the back of your boat. Next topic, what do you need to both get to another country and get into another country? You need a quarantine flag and the courtesy flag of that country to fly up your mast. And the courtesy flag flies for the entire time you're in another country. And also, planning ahead, you need the courtesy flags of whatever other countries you're going to go to in the next 6 to 12 months, because it can be difficult to get flags in other countries. We have Tonga, Fiji, and most of the South Pacific and New Zealand, and a quarantine flag that we've been using for years, so we're all good. The passage is about 1,200 nautical miles, and so we need to have enough spare parts, fuel, and other bits and pieces to be completely self-sufficient. Spare parts we tend to take are oil filters, fuel filters, V-belts, extra coolant, extra oil, and for a passage where we may be motoring for half the time, at least enough fuel to get us about half the way there. Because of the time of year that we're going, it is predicted that we will have a couple of days at least of no wind. So we've got extra jerry cans on the deck ready to go. We carry 4 gas bottles on our boat, so we just need to make sure that they're all actually filled with the right adapters before we go. Food. From past experience, neither of us are going to want to cook on days where the weather is really unpleasant. That in mind, over the last couple of weeks, started making extra large meals and cryovacking them. It will allow us to get a lot more food into our freezer. So my plan is to do 12 meals worth of frozen food, which we can then use for either lunches or dinners. Use them up along the way, plus or minus have probably 4 or 5 days worth of just food that we can cook as well, because that factors in a big redundancy if things don't go very well and we are at sea for longer than we expect. We don't need to go down to tuna and rice just yet, but if we did have to, we've probably got another 20 days worth of dried food. And then it's the practicalities of getting there based on navigation. Do we have the right Navionics charts in our chart plotter? I have found our old South Pacific little mini SIM card, which we put in, works, and I've updated the charts. I've also gone and dug out the physical paper charts, because when we're doing a passage, we do plot the actual lat and long twice a day of where we are on the paper chart, just in case everything dies. We know where we are. Quite a few countries that are well-known cruising grounds have either books that you can buy with the, you know, where to cruise, where to anchor, what the good spots are, or a lot of them have apps. So I have found the New Zealand Cruising and Power, Yacht and Power app, I think it's called. It's excellent. $80, I've bought it. From a sailing perspective, we use satellite charts offline through a company called Zulu Waterways. If you plan ahead, you can download maps for the locations that you're going, and it gives you offline, real-time position of where your vessel is relative to anchorages, reefs, that sort of thing. Each country is different. In general, we would normally investigate probably 2 or 3 countries ahead, just so we know what's happening in the next country in case there's anything specific we need to do. Pretty much what I've talked about today applies to most countries, certainly most of the countries that we've been to. However, there are some extra things you need to sort of think about, which is there a particular sequence in which you need to go and see certain officials? Because in some countries, they don't come to you, you go to them.
We go to immigration first, then customs, then the captainery.
And the sequence for them is very important. Additionally, many countries that we've visited have got some dress standards that you might need to be respectful of. For example, any Muslim countries require you to cover your shoulders and cover your knees, and so you don't really offend the officials before you've even started the process. With things that get confiscated or by security when they come onto your boat, Often they might want you to pay duty if you're carrying too much alcohol, so just investigate that as well. And also just be aware that they are well within their rights to seize things like shells, wooden items that you've had from other countries. So yeah, just be prepared for everything and investigate. And that's about it. Probably good to go.
On the next adventure with Lukimyu,
We are headed to New Zealand. Clear out Monday morning.
concerned about the Seaway bar crossing?
Nah.
If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe and share it with your friends.
Staring out the window down